Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License Flight number 39 with service to New York, New York, brought to you by Waystar Royco. We ask that you please fasten your headphones at this time, secure your podcasting device, and remember, if you are down a man for your billionaire softball game, just giving away $1 million for home runs, give our pilot Rich a call. He would be happy to sign an NDA to do anything.
Welcome to the TV Pilot's License. My name is Geoff Kerbis, joined by Max Singer and Rich Inman. How you boys doing today?
You went with the NDA side, direction of that and not the baseball direction?
Every day we do this show, we have something to promote, and this week it's that Rich plays in an adult baseball league.
Well, gentlemen, this week we are talking about Succession, as it is unfortunately coming to an end this weekend. But before we do so, it appears that there's a new hotshot within the media space that is boarding our flight and possibly looking for investors. Our guest this week is a stand-up comedian, producer for Jimmy Kimmel. Please welcome Anthony Dalmeida. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh,
Of course,
You look
pleasure to be here.
very much set for
I'll
our
take
flight.
this I'm
Well,
not
Anthony-
promoting Spirit Airlines, but that happens to be what I have there.
Oh my goodness.
you bought the Spirit pillow?
It was given away. At one point, we actually chartered a flight, an entire flight to New York to do the show in Brooklyn, and it happened to be a Spirit flight, and it was a wonderful flight. The only wonderful Spirit flight I've ever been on, really. But yeah, that was in the goodie bag.
It's the only
good to
neck
be
pillow
here.
that's also stuffed with peanuts.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
it's a
it's a
twofer.
2-in-1. This is actually my first time on a podcast.
Oh, well,
No
welcome. We're glad to be taking your podcast virginity. I don't know exactly what it is. I'll workshop that and replace it later.
I hated that.
Now, what we're doing here is Anthony is talking, and most of the people at home can't see us, which is crazy. It's kind of like a ghost in the radio type situation. But I think you're doing a great.
That's what you think, but I found the YouTube pretty quick. I was watching it visually.
Well,
But yeah.
Viewer.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. And you actually brought Succession to us as a recommendation. I'd love to hear, and I think we'd all like to hear, what is your connection to this show?
Well, I subscribe to HBO Max, and I consume basically, whatever they're feeding me. But people were getting tired of hearing me talk about Succession. People want to engage to a certain degree, but then they'd hit the fatigue point. And so I figured at least I have an outlet to talk to other people that want to talk about it. If we have to record it, so be it.
And Anthony did make us a promise before he came on that this would be the last time he ever talked about Succession. It would be on our podcast. So you're
Maybe
Here it
in
is,
such a
general
public
public.
form, yeah. And Jeff and I go way back. I also just wanted to see Jeff. Jeff and I were on the crew team together. I rusted
right.
up my old crew uni so I could be
Oh,
wearing
wow.
it.
no way.
That's
Man, you're ready.
amazing.
Yes.
You're ready for land, sea, and air. That's awesome.
Yeah, I
So
think
that's the end.
Anthony is very much set to be part of the elite family of Succession. Meanwhile, I am wearing a t-shirt and feel very underdressed in this moment in time. Before we dive in too much to Succession, Max, do you mind telling folks what this podcast is all about?
So here at TV Pilot's License, we break down the pilot episodes of some of television's most famous, or in some cases, infamous pilot episodes. We learn how these shows came to be, if we think they're effective pilots and making us want to watch more, and if they could be made today. We've got a whole bank of episodes wherever you get your podcasts from, so go back and give us a listen. Check us out on YouTube if you want to see all the costumes and props that Anthony brought to the table today. And if it is your first time flying with us, sorry it's not a private jet, but welcome aboard.
And Rich, what is your question of the week?
So I think I might have watched the fewest number of Succession episodes of anyone on this podcast today. So I we'll talk about everything that goes into the legacy and, history of the show. And I'm sure you guys will drop a bunch of inside jokes that a lot of the people who are Succession fans will end up loving. So I'm going to ask a fairly related question. What do you guys think about the estate tax and what should it be?
Oh God. Well, as a homeowner, what I will say, and as part of the estate tax, I think that it's a really important and ongoing conversation that needs to be readdressed. Most likely, in all honesty, without me diving too much into politics and net worth discussions, there's something that's wrong with it, and we should probably think a little bit more about how we are taxing folks who have as much money as certain billionaires. Just a thought. But I'm a gigantic fan of, there is that one billionaire, I believe, who's talking about donating most of his earnings to charities, which is awesome. And let's see more of that in life.
Yeah,
like
also
the
pay your
owner,
taxes.
like the owner of Patagonia, for example. He's taking away his stake and just donating it. So, Anthony, what about you?
I don't really opine on things that I have such little control over, such as legislation. But I think this show does a really good job of putting that subject matter in the crosshairs. The eat the rich, the obsessively sort of wealth obsessed people that are recognizing that so much wealth is misplaced, and then putting this humanizing, but also showing how miserable the experience of wealth is. I think it's just really kind of what everyone has been seething about, and so Succession does a good job of being cathartic release and fly on the wall of that world.
That's great. I didn't know they even got into it.
Max, what about yourself?
As a millennial comedy writer living in Los Angeles, this is never going to affect me. So I'm going to say good, unless I'm wrong, in which case I'm going to say bad.
I think you covered all your bases there, bud.
Yeah.
What a great Mr. Peanut Butter-esque political answer. I love that.
All right. Well, Rich, what about yourself after thinking about this question for a little bit?
In the first 5 minutes of Succession that I watched, I would say that the estate tax should be 99% above $1 million. And I know they got 4 seasons of material out of this, or 4 or 5. How many?
4.
Seasons? 4 seasons of this. Look, I'm sure the drama of the show is amazing, but all these people should not be relying on nepotism for their entire lives. Anywho, let's keep going.
Well, Rich,
they also kind of address that too, where Shiv wants to get into politics, and Logan is like, why do you want to be at the shit end of the horse? Wouldn't you rather be at the front feeding it? Even if you were going to try or say the estate tax should be changed, you have someone like Logan Roy who has power and influence who's going to stop that from occurring, and that's the problem.
And Rich, I just want to say, I know you talk about nepotism, but keep in mind that all of our dads started this podcast decades ago.
I know. We have it's been a long line of podcasters in this family.
Oh my God. What's up, Dad? Well, Rich, thank you for that question of the week. Before we dive into this show, let's talk a little bit about a synopsis. When a media tycoon considers retirement, each of his 4 grown children begin angling for their piece of the pie in this series. I think that's actually a pretty solid synopsis, but Max, what went into making Succession?
Totally. And just a little bit of a clarification for folks at home who are listening. We are recording this episode the day before the penultimate episode of this series airs. By the time this episode hits the waves, we will be days away from the actual show's finale. So if we make any predictions that are either entirely on the nose or wildly inaccurate, just know the time frame that we're recording this. So today we are talking about Succession's pilot episode titled Celebration, which aired on HBO on June 3rd, 2008. We're going to be talking about a writer by the name of Jesse Armstrong. So Armstrong is one of the most prolific working writers in the UK. He's been a recipient of the Writers Guild of Great Britain Award, the British Comedy Awards, and been named to the Hot 100 on Broadcast Magazine, highlighting the most successful people working in TV. And he gets his start at the beginning of the 21st century with his writing partner, Sam Bain, who he meets at the University of Manchester. and they move together to London to try and make it an entertainment. They write for what is arguably the most British-sounding sketch comedy series of all time called Smack the Pony, before going on to create the cult hit Peep Show in 2003.
Love that show.
They did Peep Show? I didn't realize that. Damn. That's a great show.
So Peep Show, by just years, is the longest running Channel 4 comedy in UK TV history, but they only do like 4 to 5 episodes per season on shows in the UK. Sick. So it's not like it has like a long episode run. It just went on forever. Peep Show goes on to be named one of the best British shows of all time and featured on many lists of the best shows of the 21st century worldwide. And from there, Armstrong becomes one of the top like dark comedy satirical writers in the game. He receives acclaim for his work with Danny Boyle on the series Babylon and Armando Iannucci with The Thick of It. And the two of them actually received an Academy Award nomination together in 2009 for their work on the spin-off film for The Thick of It titled In the Loop here in the US. So we're going to take things over across the pond to our side of the Atlantic now. Armstrong makes the writer's list, the blacklist, for his script Murdoch, a dark comedy about the Murdoch family disagreeing over who should have control of the company upon his retirement. He also develops a film on the life of Republican strategist Lee Atwater alongside Adam McKay, but neither of these projects actually go anywhere. Armstrong decides he's going to retool his Murdoch script. He's going to expand upon this concept to make it a TV show, and makes the whole thing a little more ambiguous, draws inspiration as well from like the Redstone family and the Murdochs, just all of the like US media conglomerates who control everything in this country. The retooled script is picked up to series order immediately by HBO because of their relationship with Adam McKay, who had just ended Eastbound and Down with them a few years prior. So yes, Kenny Powers and Kendall Roy do exist in the same universe. It is canon. There is definitely a Kendall Roy cocaine story involving Kenny Powers somewhere on like a writer's room whiteboard. Adam McKay does direct the pilot for this episode, and it's worth noting if you are confused as to why Will Ferrell and Adam McKay are listed as producers on here, it is because of the now defunct Gary Sanchez relationship, but they couldn't exactly just slap Gary Sanchez up in what was supposed to be a prestige TV drama. So they do it a little more subtly, just kind of putting their name above Freedom Tower in the opening credits. You have a nice subtle building like Freedom Tower.
A nice subtle building.
Thank you, Max, for that little bit of history of how this was made. Let's kick things off with a senile old man pissing on his carpet, because that is how this show begins.
Well, yeah, because it's a Gary Sanchez production.
Oh my God. But I thought this was a very interesting... So one of the things that I thought was an interesting choice about the show is most of the show is filmed in shaky cam, which is such an interesting choice for prestige television like HBO, right? But we get this disoriented old man that is Logan Roy, and we watch him as he doesn't know where he is. We establish that he is not doing well health-wise, and we then find that, yeah, he absolutely was nowhere close to the toilet. And it's just, I don't know if this is a comedy or if I'm supposed to be sad at this point.
That seems to be a running theme in this. And Max, in your research for these, like how the show was created, obviously, like you said, Adam McKay directed the first one. The visual, which you mentioned, Geoff, about like the shaky cam, kind of disoriented feeling of the camera. It feels a lot like The Big Short, how The Big Short was filmed. Is that a
100%.
similar creative choice?
It's the same like smash-ins and pull-outs. It looks that very similar like handy cam style that he filmed The Big Short with, for sure.
Sweet.
And it's something that I believe they use the entirety of the show, correct? Like as like a filming choice?
It becomes like a stylistic choice.
Yeah, I would say the entire series. It's not as much as the way we follow Logan in the pilot. Like it's definitely a little subtler, but this is definitely a show that uses a lot of smash cuts, quick whips and pan arounds. It definitely feels like you're in the room with everyone at all times versus setting up a framed shot and you're observing from the outside. You definitely are a little more in the thick of it, which maybe, deals with some of the discomfort someone might feel in some of these scenes.
Yeah, and then it's super interesting. And like, Anthony, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. The juxtaposition of this scene where we see this older gentleman who, is confused where he is, has this accident in the middle of the night, to then almost a smash cut of we are now in the car with Kendall Roy, who is singing as loudly as he can to Beastie Boys, to either the pain or delight of his Russian driver who is escorting him to work.
Yeah, and the driver seems to be like, this is just another average day for him. You're the man, Mr. Roy, after he's doing this whole cringe headphone routine. Just speaking to the previous scene real quick, I feel like it wasn't necessarily funny. I mean, he's definitely a very dehydrated man, judging by the color of the urine. But the score is so like morose at that point. I feel like the main thing you're getting is like, he's on the way out here. And then so our next introduction is, of course, like the guy who's so amped to be on the way in, quote unquote. But not much more to say, except, you sort of start to see in this episode Kendall be tested by a person who seemed on the way out at the beginning, but you slowly realize is sharp as a tack and sharp to the point that he's not sure that he can let go of things, even though maybe his health is failing.
Max, you just have a note here that says type of NYC guys, and I'd like you to expand on that for a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen. We all have either lived in New York or lived adjacent to New York or spent time in New York, and we know a Kendall Roy. We know finance bros. We know people who are Nolita scumbags. We know these types of people, and I think Kendall Roy's first scene is just perfectly setting up what a New York douche this guy is. The three things that kill me are the smash cut from when the actual Beastie Boys rap fades out to hearing Kendall sing it off key. His first line just being, "Today's the day we make it happen for Krev." Like that's like the ultimate New York City douchebag line. Just like let's just fucking do it and be legends. Today's the day we make it happen. And then I love him lighting a cigarette to just take one quick puff and then just throwing it out on the ground and sticking his foot in
amazing.
it. Like he just needed that. He does it to be cool. It's like, this is a guy who's like, no, I don't smoke. I only smoke when I drink. I only smoke to be cool. I'm a social smoker. Like, yeah, fuck you.
No, this man also just really does not smoke. I don't think that he actually got any of that in his lungs.
He just needs the rush of it. He just needs the rush of the aesthetic of smoking a cigarette.
It's amazing. It's interesting you bring that up, Max, because like Kendall reminds me of, so for our audience, I, at one point for a few months, worked for a News Corp entity. So I feel a little bit of a closeness to this pilot in certain ways we'll discuss later.
I really forgot that you did that.
Yes.
I really did not need a reminder of that.
But like, Kendall reminds me of a lot of the people I worked with when I was an intern at News Corp. And like, it's so spot on that I was just like, yep, I've met Kendall like thousands of times, and he seems like the type of guy who's going in to make that big deal.
Kendall Roy says dime square unironically.
Kendall Roy follows an account on Instagram called Trillionaire Mindset.
Hey, leave that alone.
Oh, today's the day that today's the day that Geoff digs himself in a hole for Krev.
But Anthony, you mentioned the score, and the theme song for this show is so magnificent in this intro. And I think the intro is one of the first instances where I feel like on this podcast, we've seen a intro do a great job of exposition of what we should be expecting.
I don't know. I learned a lot from the Big Bang Theory theme song.
Oh my God. We are not going to be talking about that. But it was such a beautifully shot intro as well. And then you have like this powerful music that like, yeah, I could just listen to that in all honesty, like outside of watching this show. And I think that's like, is that a specialty of HBO? Probably, yeah, because every HBO show we've talked about, we talk about the music for like a while.
What White Lotus gets in there, The Sopranos,
True Blood,
John from Cincinnati.
Yeah,
all HBO classics.
This is a never skip theme song for me. If you hit skip intro while watching Succession, I don't trust you. I don't like you. This is a theme song that I throw ass to. Like when I'm watching this show on the couch, this comes on, I am getting down in my living room. Pusha T has rapped over this theme song. It slaps. Nicholas Britell is maybe my favorite composer right now. Even like a 2-star movie like Cruella has a Nicholas Britell score, and he's like doing A+ work on like a C- movie. I love him.
So after this amazing intro, we lead into this really fairly interesting boardroom scene, right? We've seen Kendall pumping himself up for something. And then we sort of get like a dick measuring contest, right? A pissing contest, let's say, in honor of our first scene of, there's a media company acquisition that's set to be done by Kendall. And we have an unwilling partner in these discussions. I'd love to hear what y'all thought about seeing this change in power dynamic from Kendall as a whole after we see him proudly singing the Beastie Boys, proudly getting one smoke out of a cigarette. What were your thoughts when you saw this change?
It's the same thing we see them doing in the final season where they're trying to acquire Gojo. They're this like bloviated media conglomerate trying to stay relevant. But to Kendall on that day, it's more than just the deal, and he's not thinking like a proper businessman because he knows that it's like kind of his first little test. Dad's out of the office. He's supposed to be coming up to the leadership position. But he also knows on some level his dad is testing him on if he can seal this deal. And the first sign that something's going wrong, he starts to get a little shaky and just wants to up the bid because he just wants the win for his dad's, appreciation or admiration, and doesn't realize the whole time that, there's a litany of tests going on between if he's going to review the documents his dad walks in and ambushes him to sign in like sort of trust me, it's just housekeeping, or whether or not he's going to leave that business deal to go to Logan's birthday party, all of which Kendall makes an assessment that it's kind of a test, makes a decision, and fails all of those tests. He goes to the birthday party, wrong. It's supposed to be business first. He doesn't have his lawyer look over the paper, wrong. Don't just trust your dad, always look at it. And so we sort of watch him falter, or watch the beginning of him falter in that scene in the boardroom. It does get worse with his opponent.
I've got a question for the board, just something I want to toss out here. So you're sitting at a table with other people, and a guy walks in, throws open the door, and shouts, "Are we ready to fuck or what? What do you do?"
Oh God, I don't know. I think that I think I'm in the wrong room. If someone's walking in like wearing a suit that's more valuable than all of my possessions combined, but it's just one of those things where I really love the writing of Kendall Roy at this point, because I'm just like, at first I'm like, oh yeah, I've met this dude, right? Like I've met this dude 1,000 times. Mm-hmm. Then I'm like, oh, interesting. Like we're keeping that energy, but as soon as something goes wrong, and Anthony, you said this, like we see an entire shift in personality as a whole, and we start to see this panicky, like twitchy, nervous guy that I'd never want to do business with, but almost puts on this facade of like, oh no, I'm super confident. Like the person who says they're confident is usually the least confident person in the room.
Yeah, he definitely has like it seems like he learned business etiquette, or not etiquette, but just like business strategy just from watching like 50 episodes of Shark Tank and just taking the worst behaviors that all the people did right before they made offers and just combine that into one person, because he doesn't he very visibly I don't know, common sense wise, like makes very bad decisions. And, the test from his dad, losing the confidence of the Volter guy into making this deal, but he goes in there with the "Are we ready to fuck?" conversation, which is just like it is so over the top and unnecessary. And you actually get like a decent bit of exposition here from the Volter CEO too, because he clues us in that Royco, or Waystar Royco, is not a very reputable company. they're not putting out very quality content. They are just going to kind of gut this company from his interpretation. So I feel like that also, with just like one or two sentences, Jesse Armstrong really puts this scene in, like, really puts the entire reputation of Waystar on, like, in the audience's brain, like, immediately, which I thought was an important part of this.
Let's
Absolutely.
Let's talk about a little bit of a different scene than this very intense multi-million-dollar acquisition that is set to go on. With a scene where we see a man, getting high in his car before watching a training video while wearing a mascot outfit. I know that Greg, Rich, I also have not watched this show before. And I've heard about the lore of Greg, and this was the perfect introduction to Greg, as far as I'm concerned. For our two more senior folks, as far as Succession goes, what did you think about seeing Greg for the first time?
Oh man,
through the pilot?
smash cutting to a lanky dude smoking weed in a Subaru Forester. I felt so seen by Succession.
Very, very shakily hitting a one-hitter.
Yeah, Greg is us, I feel like, because as the viewer, because we don't really get to see the 1%'s life, and Greg is kind of outside of it too, even though he's related to it. So I feel like we kind of track our lens, especially when Greg finally gets to Logan's party. We are kind of that fish out of water too, and he's also, of course, like a delightful, extremely comedically capable actor. But I want to say one thing about the scene before in the boardroom, which is one of my favorite lines of the pilot, which is when I think Frank or someone, after the deal is going the wrong way, he's like, "Do you want to call your dad?" And Kendall flips out and he's like, "No, do you want to call your dad? Do you want to call your dad?" Okay, no one wants to call their fucking dad. And then he's like, "Dad," and he literally, because everybody knows, and that's another great bit of exposition, even though he's in there playing the big man, everyone knows he's really not the big man still. We do need to call the dad. Maybe they shouldn't have said it, but that's the fact. Like, we're calling the dad. And so I just thought, man, by the end of that scene, this show is pretty set up. We see the problem immediately. And Greg, of course, like, then right on cue, immediate comic relief, and the training instruction for how to be the dog even goes into a little more detail in the pilot script. I think they had to cut some stuff for time, but super fun scene.
I think what we're getting at with these first three scenes between like Logan in the middle of the night, the intro to Kendall and the boardroom, and now this wildly different tone with Greg Hirsch at the amusement park and learning how to be Dodrick the mascot, is that we're just setting up this ensemble world here, and we're going to be seeing different storylines happening congruently. We are seeing truly a world, like we see Waystar as this gilded tower with Kendall, and then we see it as like a shitty local amusement park with Greg. And I think another thing the show does so well that establishes what an ensemble it is the credits are in alphabetical order. The credits have nothing to do with the order of appearance or how high on the call sheet you are. This show treats everyone on equal footing in terms of their role in telling the big story. And I love how much we jump around in these first like 5-6 minutes.
Yeah, I feel like I would be remiss to not mention how Greg gets fired, which is he gets assaulted by a bunch of children, and then one of the most violent puking scenes I've ever seen in my life. But like, that is the moment where I was just like, yep, this was produced by Adam McKay and Will Ferrell.
The visual of the puke coming out of the Dodrick eye holes is burned in my brain. It is so gross. It is so funny.
We get a good slice of his personality when we hear his choice of excuse to his mother.
It was so
when
great.
He's like, "I picked up a homeless person. I didn't want them to get raped. And they smoked, I don't know if you know a doobie, they smoked it in the car." It's just so like outlandish.
And it smells like skunk weed in the car now.
Even
I don't know if
the
we
mom's
ever
like, "Greg."
Yeah, I don't know if we ever see Greg's mom again, but like Greg, the actress that played Greg's mom, was so good at like in just that single scene of conveying Greg is the largest fuck up and the biggest idiot you will ever meet in your
Well,
life.
he is the largest fuck up. He's 6'7". There are many taller fuck ups.
He's 6'7"? The actor is 6'7"?
His mom has such
That's
a
too big.
great pilot line. Like, it's just such a great line to have in your pilot episode, which is, did you think for 1 second to tell them who you are? And we don't get the answer to it. I love that. I love that line so much.
But also, like, who cares? If you're, does she know that, like, that would work on very low level amusement park employees? Like, if I was working for someone, if I was working at Starbucks and, like, Howard Schultz's nephew was working at the store and, like, fucking up a lot, I know it's not going to cost me my job to fire him. It is such a wild, like, I mean, and, you know, going back to, I keep putting this in the lens now that you mentioned, Anthony, of like, that character is the general public, and that is all of us watching all these extremely wealthy dickheads misbehave, and that is his first foray into it. It's like, did you tell them who you are? Which doesn't look like it's something that plays into his thought process whatsoever. He does not behave like them.
He's embarrassed. He didn't want to. And I think he says something to that effect of like, well, I forget what the line is exactly. He does respond to it, but we get the sense that he just wanted to be like everybody else. He felt very uncomfortable throwing his weight around, which is another thing we track through the seasons as he starts to get a taste for that, and we start to see like Slimeball Greg develop later on.
Oh, so, we get some Slimeball Greg later in this episode.
Yeah, we get a lot of Slimeball Greg later in this episode. Let's talk a little bit about meeting one of the other Roy children, with Roman, with one of the greatest opening lines for a character ever, when he just states, hey, motherfuckers, which is just like, first of all, I was watching this with my wife, and she just said, is that a Culkin? Had no idea to expect Kieran Culkin in this role. But then to just get this scene with him fully, by saying that line, I automatically know everything I need to know about Roman. And like, Max, going back to your, like, the guys of New York City, I know exactly what guy this is in New York City. I have unfortunately met this man as well, and I want to spend zero time with him at all.
Oh, yeah. Everything Roman says in this scene just indicates what this person is so clearly. Like, oh, you know, I was never C-suite material. I've been like doing my thing on the West Coast. You know, I'm in the studios. I'm making shit happen. I think this is one point. I was never a corporate cocksuck. That's a very specific phrasing. And Kieran Culkin is delightful in this role. And it's wild to me that he was not brought in to audition for Roman Roy. He was brought in by producers for Cousin Greg.
Interesting.
And they wanted him for Greg. He didn't feel like he was a Greg, read the script, said, I like this part of Roman, and he filmed 3 scenes from the pilot by himself and just sent them to the casting director. It was like, nope, you're setting me in for this. And he ended up being the guy who got it.
He does.
True.
Of anyone in the family, though, I know he's an asshole, but of anyone in the family, he seems like the best hang. Like, I think I probably want to be friends with him the most. I feel like a night on the town with Roman Roy is going to be a lot better than anyone else in that family.
This scene also did something super interesting. And it was a theme that I saw throughout the pilot of the interaction of the Roy children amongst each other, just of the Roy family amongst each other, is so interesting because we start to see them revert to like roles that they had when they were all living in a household. And I think this is all something we experience, right? When you go home, or when you're with your parents, or when you're with your siblings, you revert to a different way of behaving that is like not how you are now because you've evolved as a human being. And seeing another side of Kendall, right? Because we don't really see, throughout this pilot, we only see really one version of Roman, and it is the hey motherfuckers version of Roman. For Kendall, we see another, shade of his personality in that he is once again trying to be establishing that he's an authority figure and he's running things and he's good, but also somewhat submissive at the same time to his younger brother in this instance.
The fact that he brings in this business alchemist as like, he can't just
That
walk
was
into a room. He has to hire a man to sage the room. He's like doing a bit. And then we also, after that whole thing where he's kind of making it about himself and corporate life, not for me, you find out later when he talks to Logan that that was a spy operation. Like, you know, Logan realizes that when Logan goes in, Kendall, you know, takes his feet off the desk. So he had sent, what's his name, Roman, to essentially suss it out. And so as casual as Roman's being, he also like has a agenda there, and he doesn't really give a good report for his brother. Like, everyone's saying congratulations, no one really wants to see him move up.
I'm so glad you mentioned the Alchemist, Anthony, because I was literally about to ask you, how often does the Business Alchemist come into your offices? Is it like weekly, monthly,
I
quarterly?
don't know. I don't know if the Business Alchemist is a thing. I have my own sage in Palo Santo that I use, and I will give it out. If I feel that someone is in need of some cleansing, I'll just gift them some Palo Santo.
All right, so for those listening at home, we're going to make sure you have Anthony's socials listed, and you can contact him for all of your business alchemy needs.
It's a nice little side hustle. I would absolutely take that on. So let's talk about, we meet our third Roy child with Shiv, or Siobhan. And we also, more interestingly, even though like we see Shiv going through this deal of, I learned what a precond is, which I am going to be using that word forever now.
That's a term that I've only heard in this episode and I love it.
I absolutely love the idea of a precond. But what was more interesting to me is I thought this scene did such a good job of painting Tom, if that makes sense. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see Max's amazing Tom shirt. Tom sucks. Like, Tom is the suck up that is like just that we've all met and dealt with of, you know, I don't even know how to say it. If there's a powerful person in the room, you are only focused on that powerful person. And there's a wonderful theme that we see throughout this episode that I don't want to talk about just yet that has to do with Tom, but how important getting this single gift is for Logan for this surprise birthday party, that even Shiv is like, he's not going to give a shit. Just get him anything and spend over 15 grand on whatever you get him.
First off, Geoff, I need to lay down the law here. There is to be no Mr. Darcy slander on this podcast.
Yeah, my wife will be thankful that you said that as well.
We will not shit talk anyone from Pride and Prejudice on this show today. Tom staring longingly into the window at Dolce & Gabbana and window shopping and just obsessing over what to get, and what we end up seeing the gift being, though, is it's so great for his character to see how he values money as social clout and how like those two are connected to him. And in this family that's so clearly, you know, generational wealth and this upper echelon, like the elite of the elite, Tom, although doing very well for himself, is always going to be an outsider in it. And the way he views money and like gifting, you know, his love language being gifts, is very powerful indicator here. Also, just if you have never listened to interviews with Matthew Macfadyen or Sarah Snook, do it, because they have just the thickest British and Australian accents in existence. And the fact that Sarah Snook has a basically uncomprehensible Adelaide accent, and then you don't get any of it in this show, is premier acting work. I hope that she gets her Emmy at some point for the accent work alone. Yeah, watch it after the episode special on HBO when they sit down and you're like, what the fuck are they saying?
It's like when you find out that Idris Elba is British.
Oh my god.
Shiv is you know, almost, did you say incomprehensible? Because I was going to say, like, I'm having to replay the things she says because it's such a thick accent. But I kind of buy it that she's such a great actor. Tom, however, seemed like he had to be born in New England. Like, he just felt so real as an American from that region who's like a little bit of wealth, but still trying to be upwardly mobile. And to hear his accent and realize then when you start looking into it, how British the show really is at its core, down to even the players. It's kind of fascinating, and one of the reasons why it's such a like textured, rich, intelligent show because it has that heritage.
I love that part of Tom's character because he, like, I feel like, you know, obviously Greg is going to evolve over time into more of a Roy, but Tom just feels like you just took someone with the largest social ineptness and just threw him in front of a bunch of wolves. And it is like, I think peak comedy writing. It seems like I don't know how much and how involved he was in the actual writing of this, but it seems like a very Adam McKay comedy character to throw in there. It just seems like a perfect fit for them all to just like be piranhas at, and he's the punching bag of the group.
Mm-hmm.
So one of our storylines in this show is we're following Kendall and we're following this deal and this acquisition. The other one that I think is so interesting is following Logan Roy dealing with the mindset of the potential of retirement as a whole. And it's so thoughtfully put together in that, yes, we've already met him in our first scene of the show with this, when he has the accident in his home. But then we see this man who is surrounded by a gigantic staff of human beings in this beautiful home in Manhattan, watching as his birthday is being, his surprise party is being set up in front of him. And he is just very much alone with nothing to do. And even though none of us on this podcast are close to retirement, I think that's a story that we've all seen of someone contemplating the idea of, oh, once I'm done with work, what the fuck am I supposed to be doing with my life other than watching everything go on around me? And it just did such a great job of, and Brian Cox also just a fantastic actor who just like carries this important scene by not saying much at all while doing it at all. And he decides to go into the office, but before we talk about that,
So I want to read you something. This is only a draft version of the script, but so I just want to read a part of it. So Logan walks the apartment. There have been a couple of days, but all is unpacked. The distribution of objects is unfamiliar. In the walk-in wardrobe, Logan sees a maid with a bucket of water rubbing the white carpet with a sponge to remove the urine stain. He doesn't acknowledge her, but walks to the living area. He tries to sit down on a couch. This is almost a test for him. Can he sit on a couch and relax like a regular human being? And he hasn't really had time to sit on a couch on a weekday morning for a lifetime, so it doesn't really work. He looks at the newspaper air with the flair of his son, Kendall. After a few beats of trying to read, sipping coffee, he's up. So I feel like maybe if you're watching it, it's easy to miss, and you're like, oh, he just looked at a magazine, but that's meant to be sort of encapsulating of his crisis of character right now.
That's such a good spot. I'm really glad you found that, because that is like, I did not piece that together the first time I watched it. That is like, I think it's super indicative of just how Americans view our relationship to working in general. Like, all of us are going to feel, like you said, Geoff, a bit of fear of not knowing what is going to fulfill our lives when it's not working for either ourselves or other people. And it becomes an even crazier thing for me because, like, you know, I feel like all of us here probably have a number of like dollars in our bank account that will get us to stop working entirely. And I think something with the super rich, and I think like kind of I want to say like a mental illness, but it is like there doesn't seem to be that number for rich people. Like, yeah, I have made this comment about Elon Musk so many times. He could have just stopped. He could have just not done anything. He didn't have to live publicly. And then there's still something in his brain that makes him go, no, I'm still going to embarrass myself on Twitter. I'm still going to try to be this megalomaniac every single day. And I think that's another aspect of the wealth illness, really, of that you just have to keep going, and there has to be more to earn, more to put in your bank account. It is like, you know, the fact that he can't stop is like, oh, do I have a personality outside of this business?
Rich, it's super interesting you bring that up, because the podcast that you made fun of me for listening to, Trillionaire Mindset.
Wait, that's a real podcast?
Yes, that's a real podcast that I listen to all the time.
I did not know that. I thought I made that up.
And Ben Kahn, Emil DeRosa, if you're listening to us, big fans, friend of the pod for sure. So one of the guests they had on that podcast was the CEO of Robinhood. And one of them asked very point blank, when is it enough? Right? Like you're worth $1.5 billion is
Yeah.
and it almost, I think you so aptly put it, like it does at some point seem like a disease where they have no idea what to do with $1.5 billion.
This guy has a bigger
know
boat.
What to do.
This guy has a bigger boat. This guy has a nicer plane. This guy like had a better vacation, or like, you know, this guy has so many mistresses or something like that. It's always a competition, and it's like it's such a sickness. But I think this is what just keeps Logan Roy in there, because what else is he going to do?
I think that's one of the things that makes this show so enticing, though, and why, you know, you have dedicated fans like Max and Anthony, who people won't talk to about this show anymore, because there is that idea of, holy shit, for a lot of people, this is a very foreign concept that they'll never be able to deal with in their lifetime, and watching a family and a man deal with that is super duper interesting as a whole. And, you know, moving forward a little bit of this man who has so much control of his life, we see him talk with what was the character's name, the head of the staff for his home, and he makes the deal that, like, hey, I'm gonna go into the office and just for a little bit and be gone as I've been instructed to.
Oh, is that not his wife?
That's his wife.
That's his wife?
That's Marcia, his third wife.
No, I've never. That's the point of this
That's
podcast.
Marcia.
We only watch the pilot.
No, Marcy. That's his wife.
Yeah, we.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't know what their relationship status is exactly, but it's like this is, you know, has been a significant female in his life for a while, who, as the show progresses, we realize is quite savvy in her own business, right? And just for the being there next to him, she has like lawyers on the side making sure she's getting even better deals and more board seats, and that's what we're seeing in the current or more recent episodes.
Hey Jeff, why'd you think that she was his staff?
Because I don't think they did a good job of establishing that she wasn't in the staff. I think they did a shitty job. Because and also, like, in all honesty, like, you have heard these stories about these very wealthy human beings who end up getting so close to someone who works for them that they then want to give them a part of their fortune or say in everything. And, like,
I think Elon Musk had about 7 or 8 of those
from this woman. Yeah. Like, I know that's a joke, but in all honesty, this is a common story that, like, I have, like, the point of this podcast, right? We watch the pilot, we go from there, we take the information we were given in this pilot, and then we decide whether or not we want to watch it. Based off of the information of just this pilot that I have been given about this woman, I assume, oh, cool, this is someone that is very close to Logan, and that is setting up all this, instructing the staff, all of that stuff. This is what
Let me defend you for a second, Jeff, because the show is subtle in ways like that, where, like, I'll watch a Succession episode like 3 times by the time I'm done to it, including like when I've gone back to previous seasons. But in this one, I'm not sure if this is exactly the shooting script, but Marcia's like, you know, getting the whole party ready. He's saying, don't have people here and don't have them in my space. And she's like, I got it. I'm going to take care of it. She kisses him. He's a tough old bastard. Not of a generation to melt and kiss. Logan, Marcia, what? Logan, look, I'm not about to spill my guts like some queer, but, you know, he looks at her, doesn't say it, in parentheses, I love you. And then Marcia's like, thank you, I love you too. So he's not exactly affectionate to a degree that you're going to see, oh, that's his woman. You know,
that's his partner.
It's easy to miss something like, I don't know if it's easy to miss that by the time you finish the episode, but a little defense for Jeff on the subtlety.
I appreciate.
I'm glad you brought in a ringer, Jeff.
Since they made Jeff so hangry, should we move on to the birthday lunch?
Yeah, let's move on to birthday lunch, because we do get that quick scene of seeing Logan go into the office, say, hey, you need to sign this. Anthony, you did a great job of summarizing what the purpose of that entire scene was. But before we go on to the birthday lunch, Cousin Greg is back, or should I say Cousin Craig, and he basically is waiting like a stalker in an elevator for Logan, and it is such a comedy of errors scene that was perfectly played in this instance. If you were going into your building and then a random stranger was waiting for you with a quote-unquote gift, what would your response be if you did not have a bodyguard?
Yeah, in an unmarked black bag.
I think it's just perfect that Greg has that look. It's just he is the perfect look for someone crazy who's there to bomb the place. He has so I think that putting him in that position to not be properly introduced was brilliant, because we also get to see how important of a person Logan truly is. That it's not someone you just walk up and go to your uncle's party just like that. But I think there's also that little bit of forgive me, what is the Greg's actor's name, but his improv prowess. Because that feels like a scene they did a few times and took the rawest, funniest take, because it is a hilarious part.
So from this elevator ride where we get this idea of Logan has no idea who the fuck Greg is, to the point where he calls him Craig and his children have to correct him. We meet the fourth of the Roy children, where we meet Connor, I believe their name is.
Yes.
And yeah, Connor, who lives on basically, he is a moisture farmer, which is just a wild job. This is played by Alan Ruck, who may look familiar to some of y'all, but in this instance, it's an entirely different human being than some of the other Roys that we've met. And this is someone who still is extremely wealthy, right? But has chosen to take themselves out of the hustle and live in, I think they said they lived in Montana or something like that. They live in the middle of nowhere as far as the rest of the Roys are concerned. And it's super interesting to see the difference, because then we get one of my favorite things ever. After this surprise where Brian Cox perfectly delivers great, excellent, wonderful when he's supposed to be surprised, and then yells at his wife about not wanting to be surprised at the elevator, we get the goo being given by his eldest son, which, first of all, I think that is such a thoughtful gift. Sourdough starter is not an easy thing to do, but you see this man who is so out of touch with reality look at it and be like, what the fuck is happening and what am I holding?
Well, and Geoff, you mentioned the and Rich, you touched on this too, like the fear of what do you do when you don't have control once you're out of the workplace. And so Connor, being the thoughtful son, is like, I'm going to get you this hands-on project. He says it's something for you to make, I think is the way he phrased it.
You want to make something.
Yeah, you want to make something. And that's Logan's whole thing, is he's built empires. He's built this huge conglomerate. And so Connor's like, in retirement, you could still make something. And you put that across from Tom, whose gift idea is, what's the flashiest symbolic thing I can get you? And Connor's like, I need something for my old man to pass the time. Yeah. And Pilot Connor is he's such a delightful, like, fish out of water, but it's still clear there's something there. Like, I own four or five farms and aqueducts and I farm moisture. Like, clearly he's still full of shit, but in a different way from the rest of his siblings.
He is hoarding water.
Yeah, and there's no right way to give Logan a gift.
Yeah, it's also
what do you
give?
I was just going to say it's an impossible task, but he just uses it as an assessment. He makes a little comment. He doesn't really need a gift, but it's all part of his little chess strategy of where everyone is at. And that in the script there, he reacts to that just by saying, when he's like, I thought you want to make bread the old way. And then I think they improv, because it's not in that version, but he's like, oh, old bread. Huh. But later, and he's like, at least it was interesting. Like, that happens to get a good mark in the end over something like the Petit Philippe, which is just like what rich people can already buy rich thing. But in the end, nothing quite right. I think we all know people that are hard to buy for like that.
It is very much like what do you get a person who literally has everything? And I think Connor is the most relatable character for me, at least, based on the conversation we just had of when the hell do you stop? And I think Connor really I'm moving to a fucking farm and letting other people handle my money if I just know I have endless money like that, there's no way you will ever see me in Manhattan, like talking about like nuts and bolts of business things and getting all stressed out or anything like that. I am gone. Someone else can sign stuff for me. All the other kids are, all the other kids can sign the contracts, but I am out the door.
We do get this super interesting, almost foreshadowing of what Kendall's life is like when they introduce that his wife and kids come to the party, or his ex-wife in this instance. It's almost, for Logan, I feel like it is, and this is how I got it. It conveyed like, oh yeah, if you want your son, if Kendall is supposed to take care of the company, he's supposed to copy everything that you would have done, right? Which means don't go to your dad's birthday party. Don't go, don't care about seeing your kids, right? Like, and even Kendall's affectionate with Anthony said about like the affection between Logan and his partner. Kendall is showing more affection to his ex-wife and his children than we've seen from Logan this entire pilot so far. And it is almost like another test of, oh, you're a human being? Cool. You can't be the CEO of my company. And we get that information in this next scene where Logan tells the children, hey, Kendall basically already signed this contract. I need y'all to agree with it because we're going to give an extra share of the trust out, or an extra 2 shares of the trust out. And also, I'm going to not be giving up CEO. I'm going to stay on for a little bit longer, just to make sure, because I'm not ready to give it up.
And not only sign this, but this is what I want for my gift. He twists the whole impossible gift giving thing into also, I'm going to pressure you into signing this contract that on some level I don't want you to sign, because I feel like if you sign it, I've raised a bunch of pushovers. So on some level, I want you to fight me about it, but I'm also going to turn the screws as hard as possible to make you do it. And we see like this like complex man who's built this empire and sort of feels rightly so that he has created his pile of money. And as much as he wants to raise his kids and train them by testing them, they will never be the people who built the pile. They will always be just the kids responding to his little tests of loyalty and shifting things around. And I thought, I didn't even get that the first time I watched the pilot, but going back to watch it, it's all set up beautifully, subtly, exactly that solution that Logan ultimately can't ever solve. His kids will never have built the company.
There's so many little moments in this entire lunch sequence that I think do a brilliant job of breaking down who these people are at their core. The way that we go from viewing Logan as being this feeble old man who doesn't know what to do with his time on the brink of retirement to this powerful, like LBJ stare down, like power figure in the way he uses like worth and clout and like mind games with his kids. With Kendall, his whole sequence with his wife and his children, something that I don't know if they mentioned in the pilot, Kendall's son is named Iverson, which there's 2 things there. In the actual context, Iverson means son of Ivor, and it's like a Norse name, like name for like a Norse god, which is also kind of similar to Roman actually being Romulus. It's like a power name. But you also can't not think that Kendall Roy didn't name his son for Allen Iverson. Yeah. Like you can't not think these things. I love that Iverson so much. I also think like seeing like the ass kissery from both Tom and Greg trying to like work their way in with Logan, how they both just try and shadow this man, is so indicative of their characters. We get so much here. I also have to say I love the exchange between Shiv and Roman, the younger siblings, at the start of this lunch, where Shiv's making fun of Roman's cologne and says, "What is that, date rape by Calvin Klein?" Roman goes, "You wish." And Sarah Snook takes the best pause and just goes, You wish.
It's very real writing. Like that. This is how people talk. Sometimes their comebacks aren't sound, and then they get called out. I think they do such a great job on this show of making it feel like you're in a real room. And I think even the creator said how he's a little bit obsessed with making people believe it's real. Obviously, it's a TV show, but he doesn't want to say, oh, this person was sick, and so that's why we had to shoot it like that. They take a lot of care that everything feels authentic and measured. And Max, to your point about both Tom and Greg sucking up to Logan for their different reasons, I thought it's interesting who succeeds out of that deal. Tom, his watch gets given away later when we get to the baseball game, so it wasn't very much of a thing. Maybe his line was cute, but what actually impresses Logan out of all the suck uppery is when Greg is in the car with him and tries to strike a deal with the estranged grandfather that Logan hates. Initially, Logan says, I'll do anything for my brother if he asks me, meaning he's not going to help Greg get a position because the grandfather's too good for it. But when Greg comes back and is like, what if I can edge my grandpa out and get that seat? Logan sees a little bit of snake in him. And that's when he's like, I think he's a good kid. And that's when he gets in, by showing his dark side.
He also does not seem that much of a player at all. Like he's really a snake in the grass up until that exact moment. And then also, God, this could have been out of the Banshees of Inisherin. And it's like, I'll do anything for my brother, but he's got to ask me for it.
So there's a couple things that happen from here. We get that reveal from Logan that everything that's been happening around Kendall is a test, and that's why he can't be CEO. Kendall has this wonderful scene that in the bathroom where we see him have this tantrum like a child. But then in a moment of like sucking up to his father, which he constantly does, and showing how put together he is, we see him clean everything up to the best of his ability. And then we get this lunch where we learn that we're going to go play a game. We've been making references to the watch, and there's one subtle thing that I thought was super cool that they did with Tom, where he is holding the box that is the gift the entirety of the pilot until he delivers it to Logan.
He's holding it like the nuclear football.
Yeah, and it's amazing because you can see in Tom's eyes, this is the most important thing that he has. And this is the most important, this is his job for the day, is to get Logan this gift, tell him the line that even Logan called him out for practicing, and then that is all that he cares about. But this was the scene where I think we're really shown just how wealthy this family is. And like Rich had, like you sort of talked about it, has us questioning the concept of, does there need to be a bigger estate tax? Because the idea of taking two or three helicopters out to the middle of the countryside of New York to play a game of softball, which they already have a scoreboard out there in the field, as well as tents and catering. Yeah. And then we get this game of softball, which is just, it's super, this is probably the scenes that I was just like, oh, this is really upsetting. Like, there are some upsetting things happening in here that, like, are cringy, but also I can't look away from what is happening.
The way they built up to this, though, with everyone chanting, like, it's time to play the game, and, like, the way that builds at the lunch table, and then it's just baseball.
Did you expect someone to just run out and them just show up with guns and be like, cool, we're gonna go?
Yeah, it's the most dangerous game. Well, they're going to an island. Yeah, no, 100%.
That's immediately what comes to mind when you're like, rich people game, most dangerous game. And that I think they do parallel that a little bit with that cringy moment in the $1 million check, because even though it's not outright violence, it is a sort of emotional violence that even Logan bristles at. It feels like even Logan realizes that's way too much, and that's the disconnect where he came from nothing. He would never, gloat or do that, but he has these children that they've lived up in the clouds their whole lives. He can't fault him for it, but this is the situation. He's got to jump up, pad the kid's palm with some cash, and give away the watch because he's created these monsters.
Kind of filling in the gaps here, basically for those at home. Kendall claims he gets a phone call where he has to go work on the Vulture deal. He's going to get it done. And it's actually him pretending to be like his own version of Deep Throat, leaking stories of Logan's well-being to the paper to try and make himself look good and slander his dad. Kendall leaves. They need someone else to fill into the baseball game. And Roman recruits the son of like the groundskeeper to jump in here. And Roman offers the kid $1 million if he hits a home run of this at bat. And what I forgot about this scene from the first time I watched it to now is that when the kid hits that ground ball, everyone at first is playing along with it. Shiv does like a dive and a fumble. Mm-hmm. She's clearly supporting it. A few people like miss some tags. And then the asshole is the guy on my shirt, Tom Wamsgams, who tags the kid and just says, "Bad luck, kid." I remember watching this and hating Roman so much for it. Mm-hmm. And when I saw what Tom did, my jaw was agape. Like, that's the worst asshole move I think of this entire pilot is Tom's refusal to play along.
It's super interesting because this is the one scene where throughout this pilot, like leading up, we've sort of been like, oh, like Logan's a sort of despicable human being. Like Roman from the start, we were like, Roman sucks. Tom, we're sort of like, there's this weird interaction with Greg where he's like, don't fucking ask me for help, but like JK, which is really fucking funny. Like, that was such a good scene. But this is the one scene where we see a little piece of humanity that still resides in Logan. And it's super important because if we don't have the scene, then there's nothing likable about Logan as a whole. But he literally goes up to this kid after being tagged out, shakes his hand, and says, "Great effort." Right?
He's the only person in the entire family that has experience of being poor or experience of not being rich. I guess that would be a better explanation of it. He's the only one that's actually been there. And I think, I don't know Tom's backstory at all because I know he's not technically part of the family, but he's just like trying to impress them, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like Tom gets in his own way of just trying to be that person who's like, me too, I'm a Roy too. I don't know if Tom and Shiv are married at this point, or anything like that, but that's very like, I don't know. It spoke more to not Tom's character as a person, but more of how much he's like willing to bend to impress them.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to put him on third base too, because if he were to do something like what Shiv did, playfully like, oh, we might let the kid get the home run, but he's the final person. It's like, oh, you couldn't catch the ball and save my family $1 million. Like, he's trying to also make this impossible good impression, where in that split second, maybe he's like, yeah, I have to catch the ball. Like,
do you think it's an intentional choice from Jesse Armstrong or Adam McKay to put Tom on third base? Like, literally the guy born on third base is the one keeping this kid from like making something?
That's such an interesting question.
Or also just that who would have the hardest decision at third base, and then maybe getting.
And I noticed at dinner too, they were all using silver spoons.
Oh my god! But even though this game was supposed to be playful, right? One of the things that does happen, which is super interesting, is there's these business dealings, right? We talk a little bit about Kendall going back to the office to sign this deal, but even on the helicopter ride there, while they're enjoying catering, right? Logan is trying to talk with his children about, hey, what do I need to do to get your vote, basically? What do I need to do to get your approval? And yes, there are mentions of like, hey, Frank, the guy who gave your birthday speech, who said he's been friends with you for 30 years, he's fucking out because I want his job. That was Roman's request. And then the request of, I forget what Shiv's request was, but she was like, hey, I'll come back to the business, but I need to be like pretty high up. And even Kendall tries to get in and be like, hey, I'm CEO, you're both co-presidents, and like, that's how we're going to deal with this.
Well, every single one of them offers their signature for the top spot. Like, there's no negotiation. I'll give you what you want if you give me the top. So now Logan has to basically play them all against each other.
Yeah, and I did love Roman's response to Kendall's offer, where he's like, let me think for a second. Okay, fuck off. And like, that was just, it was so perfectly delivered as a whole. Mm-hmm. But then we get back, and this is where I think, you know, if we did not have the amalgamation of events that came to this moment, where we see Kendall in the office standing up for himself against Lawrence and being like, this offer's so good that I'm going to have you be a pawn. Your shares are non-voting shares. Like, fuck you. That we then get this interesting moment of like, okay, cool, I'm rooting for Kendall again, even though he just went behind his dad's back. And while he's away dealing with business, as his dad probably would do if he was in this certain situation, his dad finds out from the 3 children that they're not going to vote or they're not going to sign the paperwork. And their dad suffers from a brain hemorrhage. What was so interesting, and Anthony and Max, I think that you probably know, is how Kendall finds out, right? Because at first, it isn't from his family. It's from the man he just got in bed with to do business with, Lawrence, who finds out ahead of all of them. And in my mind, I was like, who told him, right? Who knows? Who's got an insider on this situation? Because there has to be some mole or something. And immediately, I went to the Marcia character because I was just like, oh shit, she has to be, because she is right there bedside. She probably found out, texted him really quickly, and before Shiv could call. But it was such a powerful scene of like, hey, you're fucked, BT dubs, and like now you have to deal with me as a whole. And it was such an interesting way to leave this pilot.
Something that Secession does throughout its run, and we see it even in the pilot, which I think is important to get out on the field early, is that as powerful as money and status are, the most powerful thing in this universe is information. And so the way that Lawrence withholds Logan's health scare from Kendall until after they handshake on the deal and he's in on the board is super intentional. The way that Greg doesn't know how to use information at the beginning, and as we see throughout this pilot, he begins to learn how to use these tidbits to get what he wants, is super important. That is the most effective weapon that all of these people have, and it's the thing that creates the most success and downfall for all these characters season to season.
That it parallels a lot with like mob movies and stuff like that in that sense, where it's just like it's a power struggle internally. It is the information aspect is
100%.
I mean, definitely like that's such a perfect insight in the show, because like now I can kind of almost like start predicting what's going to happen in future episodes, understanding like that is, obviously they're using their own internal communication, but they're also using Twitter and business trade magazines and stuff like that, like all these different things to their advantages. And yeah, wow, that's a terrific way to put that.
And also you have like that scene proving Logan right in a way. In the lunch scene, or the scene exactly preceding lunch where Logan goes in, Logan doesn't tell Kendall one-on-one that he's not becoming the new head guy. He does it with the kids. Then Logan storms in before lunch. There's this like carefully orchestrated lunch so Logan can make the announcement, then force everyone to sit down. And like Marcia's kind of in on it. There's like, now it's dessert. Like no one can really talk for that long. And I think that's another little brilliant. You can see how the day had been especially planned all about this contract, just as like Kendall is saying that Marcia's got a death grip pussy on their dad. She walks in like, it's dessert. But what I was going to say is when he goes in one-on-one, finally he's like, Dad, you fucked me. Logan enumerates all the ways that he fucked up. And he says, sometimes it is a big dick competition. I heard you bent for him. And Kendall's like, what? I heard you bent for him and he fucked you. Like the dad, as quiet as he is, has all these gears going inside, taking every little tally. And one line that really stuck with me was like, you never lawyered the trust change. You're going to use that against me? I trusted my father. That's a black mark. It's an accumulation.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
He has such a good read on Kendall. And we see at the end how true to form that read is. Like he's losing that competition. Lawrence is 3 steps ahead of him.
So we talked about the pilot. Were there any things that you loved about this pilot that we did not discuss today? Max, I'll kick it off with you.
Yeah, I've got 2. One of them is a really short one, which is in the opening credits every single season, there's an ATN scroll for an absurd news story, and they get more and more ridiculous as the show goes on. But the one for the pilot is ATN. Why are so many of our older celebrities dying? Which is a question I want to propose to the group. Why are so many of our older celebrities dying? The longer one for me is
Chemtrails.
I love the character arc of the Patek Philippe watch, which is that it goes from being this like trophy gift that Tom thinks will win over Logan to Logan using it as a like forgiveness tool, having his bodyguard Colin give it to the family that Roman screwed over. And then the third time we see the watch, it's just sitting open on a counter.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom kept it so cradled and protected. The way that he views wealth is like this thing that you must grab and claw and hold on to at all means. And it has no intrinsic value to this family that it went to. It's going to change their life.
100%.
That watch on the resale market will likely get 7 figures. That is a watch that is worth close to $1 million, more so if you take it to the right place. And it's going to have such an impact on their life. But like, it's just things. It's just stuff. And so seeing the way that that watch changes value every time we see it, it's like value isn't just money. And I really like the way they use this prop to tell that story throughout the episode.
Anthony, what about you? Any things that you loved about this pilot that we didn't discuss today?
I mean, just to add a little bit onto Max's, I think like how the last few seconds, how we realize they are watching ATN, and even though they'd been, sort of touched by this family in a physical way, and now they've got their payday and they're gone, they're continuing to live in ATN's world and just the vast power. I think they do a really good job of showing how this is like this towering, almost too big for its own good company. That episode specifically, I think we did a great job. I would say like favorite part of the series would be a preferred question, or like craziest scenes in the series, because it really goes to some great places, like with Boar on the floor, or Kendall giving the tribute rap to his dad, Elzer the OG. Like those are standout moments in the series, and I'm excited for you to watch it, Geoff. I think you should finish it up.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'll just say if you watch this pilot and you need a break, or you say it's just not for me, I understand. I took weeks after watching this pilot the first time years ago before I wanted to watch episode 2. And it's become one of my, if not my favorite show on TV. The things that are set up in this world of how despicable these people are pay off as Jesse Armstrong has more time to develop the black humor within it. And we'll get into this, when we give our final recs and our send-offs before we land. But yeah, just think about it.
Yeah,
I didn't like it at first either. Just I thought it was
really?
not for me. Mm-hmm.
That's so
It's
interesting.
like espresso.
I
It's a
think
little bitter.
that is so interesting that both of you guys like watched this and just said, I'm gonna give it a minute before I dive in the following week. That's so interesting. And I think, it could just be watching white people behaving badly. That's just like, do I really need another example of this after like Wolf of Wall Street and Big Short and all that shit? But obviously there is a more complex weaving of a story that happens. But I think for me, one of the most important things that I thought they do exceptionally well, just going from a pilot lens, not even talking about the show in general, they do such a great job of establishing the family tree, and they make the power struggle and the needs and wants of each character abundantly clear immediately. And I think with the show introducing this many characters, this many like top level characters, they did a really, really great job of explaining what all these people are going to want no matter what. What about you, Geoff?
I think that the details that were in this show were really fantastic, right? Like, Anthony, you talked about the magazine being in the walk-in closet, right? And that having Kendall on the cover. We talk about the ATN being on the TV and that being everywhere, just seeing the size of the Royco empire in this instance. It was so thoughtfully put together as a pilot. And I think we're very lucky to be in a world where we have a organization, I'm going to say this very carefully, like HBO, that cares about the details in some of their series. They don't care about other things, but they care about the details in the series they put in. And I will commend them on that and only that in this instance. With that being said, were there any wait a minute moments, things that were just like, holy shit, I cannot believe I just saw that in this? Rich, you're shaking your head almost violently to yes. What's a wait a minute moment for you?
Well, we touched on this a little bit, but the cousin Greg flip of like him all of a sudden being a power player from like him smoking weed in his car just doesn't. It's not it for me. I feel like they needed to do that like over a longer stretch of time. Because the absolute like quick flip in the helicopter or like in the car, not the helicopter, of him all of a sudden trying to do a power play on a billionaire is like it's like a fucking ludicrous thing. Like, I don't think it's a realistic character trait of him, but maybe he's just a weirdo and that's how he behaves for the rest of the series. But yeah, it just seems
I
like
think
way
it's
out
I
of character.
think it's that he doesn't care. Greg doesn't have any framing, so he has nothing to lose. Greg is already at the absolute end of his rope. He can't go any lower. So like, why the hell not just like throw it out there and see what happens?
Even though he's like does it so half-hearted or ham-handedly, I should say. He's like, I'll scratch your back, or if you scratch my back, obviously I wouldn't scratch your back because it's too enormous a back. He's like not doing well. But I think all that matters to Logan is that he's sort of a cockroach with his back up against the wall, and he has a little bit of fight in him, and that's what I was taking from the scene. That even in his like clumsiness, Logan actually took a shine to it.
I don't believe that Logan Roy would be caught dead driving around in just a Cadillac sedan. That man 100% has a fleet of Rolls Royces that are just at his beck and call. So one, Cadillac, congratulations on getting them, on giving those marketing dollars over to HBO so you can have the Cadillac in the show. But two, let's you know what? Logan needs a Phantom. So let's all pool our funds together to get one day of a Phantom for Logan to drive around in on his birthday.
Look, there's a rich LA car and there's a rich New York car. And the rich New York car is under the radar, and the rich LA car is overwhelmingly flashy. It's something that you're gonna pull into like a 17-star hotel with. You know what I mean?
Rich, I thought you sold your car when you moved to New York.
I did. My car was so low profile that it ceased to exist.
Oh my God. Max, do you have any wait a minute moments on this pilot?
My wait a minute moment is one where unfortunately I can't turn off my lens of having seen this entire show, which is there are so many characters in this pilot that we never see again. So first off, Roman's wife, Grace Roy, and their daughter, Isla, are never in the show again after this. These characters disappear between episodes 1 and 2. Also, Kendall's seemingly number 2 guy in the Vaulter deal, Alessandro Daniels, never seen again. This actor never appears in Succession again. There are so many people who play big parts to this story who just end up on the cutting room floor. And for this being a show that was picked up to series order and is very much chapter 1 in a long story, you still realize like what happens when a pilot gets made before the rest of things get filmed. They just like axed 3 characters before filming the next episode.
That's amazing.
I thought it was interesting they changed actually where Logan's from. Like Logan was supposed to be from Quebec, and then later they told him, like, as they're already filming, oh, actually you're from Scotland, where Brian Cox
that too. Yeah, in the pilot they say that he's born in Dundee, but then he was raised in Quebec, and like subsequently he's just like from Dundee, Scotland.
That's amazing. So we get in-flight questions from our listeners or folks who are taking this journey with us, and we actually had 2 separate people send us the same exact question this week. And that is, who is the most despicable member of the Roy family? Anthony, as our guest, just based off of the pilot, who do you think is the most despicable Roy family member?
I'm going to request to go last while I ponder that.
All right. Well, as the Greg of our group when it comes to Succession knowledge, I'll go first. I definitely think that it has to be Roman right in this instance, with the idea of taunting someone who is not as well off as you with life-changing amounts of money, right? Like, we joked about it in the cold open, right? Of like Rich being willing to sign an NDA to have a chance at $1 million on a home run. But like, in all honesty, like, that was the one scene where I was just like, oh yeah, if I was the kid's dad, I'd punch Roman in the face, not caring about my job or the consequences, other than this child needs to learn a lesson of the idea of just how horrible of a human they were in that instance of making this an opportunity. Max, why don't you go next?
Well, are we just counting
Just the pilot.
people whose last name are Roy?
I'm going to say yes. Let's only count the people whose last names are Roy.
Okay. Yeah, I have to agree that Pilot Roman is the worst here. It's just, this is someone who I think out of all the siblings is the most self-involved. And I think someone who, they even say like he's like been kind of fucking around in California and he's been kind of kicked out of the C-suite. He's the black sheep. And I think he's the most manipulative of the siblings in this pilot episode.
Because, yeah, it is Roman based on the pilot. But I think the whole thing is that's the setup of like, oh, look how shitty this kid is. But wait.
Yeah.
And then, as you progress through the series, you'll find that choosing the worst one becomes harder and harder as we learn more about them. And so it's tough bookended to the pilot because I think maybe they want you to think Roman is the worst.
It's Iverson Roy, little like, shit.
Oh my God.
When he grows up, yeah.
Rich, what about you?
I definitely, like, just from how many pilots we've watched at this point, also believe in kind of like the snake in the grass, like evil person, like strategy of TV show writing, which is why I wasn't going to go with Roman. I think based on snake in the grass wise, I'm thinking either Shiv or Connor are going to be like pure evil at some point, because they seem to be the least harmful people that are on the show right now. Also Marsha is like poised to be like an insane person. I'm thinking right now Tom is going to be the craziest because he's extremely influenced by bad people. And as you can see from the Manson murders, it's pretty easy to get really influenced by bad people and do some horrendous shit. So I think Tom's got the most evil potential for me.
That's amazing.
And Tom uses an Android phone.
Kill him
in the most recent
can't trust him.
season. Well, no, you know the thing about that, right? Because Apple has this like unofficial rule that good guys can't use iPhones.
Yep.
And so there's like
you
speculation.
mean bad guys can't use iPhones?
Is that what I meant? Yes,
Yeah.
that is what I meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, villains can't use iPhones, and you can't show a case on an iPhone in a movie or TV show.
That's bonkers. Thank you so much for that in-flight question. Let's talk a little bit about the history of the show, or the legacy of the show. 4 seasons, and it will be ending at 39 episodes. Surprisingly, the show had fairly low viewership in the beginning. So it actually premiered right after the first episode of season 2 of Westworld, right? That show had 1.4 million viewers on its debut episode of its second season. That dropped all the way down to 582,000 for the premiere episode of Succession, because no one really knew what to think of it as a whole. The marketing was sort of a little bit of a mess. And this show is definitely a vibe. It's something that grows on you as a whole. And that's proven by, like the season finale of this show of episode 1 had 1.1 million viewers. The season finale of season 3 had 1.7 million viewers. Critics absolutely love this show, right? Like it averages about like an 83 on Metacritic, which means like definitely watch TV, not like must watch, but like highly recommend. The show, as we talked about, is about the Murdoch family, right? It is not like a veiled attempt. But one of the most interesting facts I found about this show was that so the Murdoch family has been asked about it, the children specifically, and they say like, oh, we find the show really amusing. And have not commented on how some of the situations which have been reported to be based off of their real life may actually be true. But
Oh, they didn't comment?
Yeah, they
weren't like,
they
oh yeah,
weren't-
we kill kids.
Who would have thought?
yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the beautiful part. Rupert Murdoch's most recent ex-wife, Jerry Hall, they got divorced. Part of her divorce settlement was she could not become associated with Succession in any shape or form as a producer or consulting
Wow.
producer, which is just brilliant. Like, holy shit. Rupert Murdoch's lawyers, you get I don't even want to say an applause, but you thought through every detail on that divorce settlement.
Jeff, you do not, in fact, have to hand it to them.
So
they have enough handed to them.
Oh
but I
God.
didn't realize that because Jerry's like a main character in the C-suite there, and I didn't realize that maybe they had lifted that.
So let's talk about nominations. This show, we've talked about a lot of shows that have like 5, 7, 10 seasons. This show only on 3 seasons worth of nominations has 148 nominations total, 52 awards. That includes 5 Golden Globes, 2 Directors Guilds, and 8 Emmy Awards. And it even won the Peabody for Entertainment, which is bonkers. I am fairly sure there will be more nominations. This show did not get our Cradle to Grave Award, which is when you win a Kids' Choice Award, and then you get a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'm so surprised. I think Logan would tell us to all fuck off if he heard that news. But this show has a continuing legacy, right? We are doing this before the finale. I'm really interested to hear what happens. But with all that being said, Rich, it is time for your game of the week.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited you guys are all here for this because we're going to do a little of Who Said It. I have compiled a list of quotes from, and we talked a little bit about the dialogue kind of being similar to shows or to movies like Wolf of Wall Street, The Big Short. Like, it's just finance people talking fast and talking mean to each other. And it reminded me of some other properties, and I wanted to see if you can pick this out. So I want you to tell me if this is a quote from HBO's Succession, or is it a quote from the lovely Disney animated series Doc McStuffins? All right, I've got a dick the size of a red sequoia, and I fuck like a bullet train. Jeff, what show is that from?
Doc McStuffins.
It is not from Doc McStuffins. That is from Succession. Max, there's something I've learned from being a doctor for so long. It's that everyone has a hero inside of them. What show is that from?
I'm going to go Doc McStuffins.
You were correct, Doc McStuffins. Anthony, I wondered why you look like a goose trying to shit a house brick, you piece of dirt.
Gosh, it could be McStuffins, but I'm going to go Succession.
You're right. All right, Jeff. A stuffing drive is something you organize to get stuffing donations for plush toys. It's kind of like a blood drive, but for toys.
I'm going to say Doc McStuffins in this instance.
Well done. Max, that cow is so cute. Look at her little cowboy hat and her boots.
I'm going to go Succession.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. That was Doc McStuffins. Anthony, what I think he meant to say is that he wished mom gave birth to a can opener. At least it would be useful.
Succession.
That is correct. Jeff, people in
I
toys...
have one for you when you're ready.
Oh, please. People in toys get hurt sometimes, and it's important to be careful when we play.
Succession.
That is from Doc McStuffins.
Doc McStuffins. It's my favorite episode.
And the last one here. It was supposed to be choreographed. That was about as choreographed as a dog getting fucked on roller skates.
I wonder what it was.
That is the director's cut of Doc McStuffins.
No, I'm so sorry. That is Succession. Anthony, what was your favorite quote?
Now this is also could be from Doc McStuffins, so the game is exactly the same. The negative case would go, you're a clumsy interloper and no one trusts you. The only guy pulling for you is dead. And now you're just married to the ex-boss's daughter. And even she doesn't like you. And you're fair and squarely fucked.
Wow. Yeah, they...
All right, guys, at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Doc McStuffins.
McStuffins. That's correct.
Oh, my God. Well, Rich, thank you for that lovely game of
You're
the
so
week.
welcome. It was a hard one. It was a hard one to put together.
Yeah. Before we land this plane and this flight, I have 2 questions for each of you, gentlemen. One is, based off of the pilot, would you continue watching the show? We've talked about this a little bit, but I'd like to hear it from each of you. And then two, rather than, hey, do you think this show deserves a reboot because it's just about to end this weekend and that feels a little bit much? Do you believe that this show should have a, excuse me, I just forgot the word, should have a secondary series that's associated with it? That maybe is based within the universe of the Roys, but we follow another character elsewhere to continue it. With that being said, Anthony, as our guest and our avid Succession fan, what are your answers?
I'd like to see a spin-off series called Incarceration, featuring cousin Greg and Tom as cellmates. I feel like they've always had a will they or won't they vibe, and a lot of sexual energy between them. I feel like a prison cell would be a great place and a good series to explore that. But I also think, to your first question of watching it based on the pilot, like I said, I didn't think it was for me until I appreciated all the subtleties that were coming to play. And I'm glad that I did continue watching, because I feel like it hit that magic stride that Veep did, where it is now in concert and parallel to our own reality as it kept going, and we get into like election interference and like the White House or the executive branch being directly in contact with the head of Fox News. Essentially, it hit that sweet spot of really mirroring the current time well. And I even think, or the creators also on Veep, like a couple of the
that sounds right,
head people on this show also worked on Veep. And so it's always a pleasure to see a show that hits that like magic dust or whatever you call it, where it's almost like, did they rip it from the headlines, or are they so on point that now the headlines are just happening to mirror the stuff on the show? So Max, I can't recommend it enough.
What about you as our other avid Succession fan?
On the merits of the pilot alone, taking away everything else I've gotten to appreciate about Succession, it's 100% a yes for me. This is a pilot that makes me want to watch more. There are so many shows we've covered where the joke is like, we don't know anyone's deal, we don't know anyone's names. And what Jesse Armstrong does in about an hour is he sets up so many parallel storylines that then come woven together. We set up so many relationships. We get so much backstory and like little specific things that tell you so much more. This show is so great at like show don't tell as like a device for telling its story. And yeah, it 100%, before you even get to the cliffhanger ending, makes you want to watch more and see where these storylines go. I think just watching as a pilot, it's masterfully done. In terms of spin-offs and secondary things, I don't want to see it, but we all fucking know David Zaslav's going to do it. There's going to be 3 of these spin-offs on Max within a year and a half. So if I had to pick one or two, I'm going to say we get one where it is finally Gregory Hirsch atop of his gilded tower, just fumbling his way all the way up to the top, and what happens when he has to run a company. Very similar to a Vincent Adultman from BoJack Horseman situation.
Yes.
The other one being that I feel like is actually more likely to happen is a prequel to the beginnings of Waystar Royco, and showing Logan Roy and his brother Ewan, who in later seasons of Succession is played by the wonderful James Cromwell, as younger men, either in the UK or coming to America, and how they built their industry from the ground up.
Rich, what about you as our other neophyte when it comes to this?
I am also in the American broadcasting nihilist sphere of understanding that there is going to be a another like spinoff or something like that. Like Max said, like it was kind of inevitable for Game of Thrones, even though like, although if people were pretty satisfied with the ending of Game of Thrones, maybe they wouldn't have done it. And also, yeah, I'm giving it another watch after this pilot. I think they set up enough of a good cliffhanger here, because this show has 2 things I personally like don't like that going against it. Number one is that it's an hour long. I gave up on Game of Thrones because it was an hour long. I've given up on a lot of other shows because the show is like an hour full of runtime each time. That already like set it back a couple paces for me. Probably why I didn't start it in the first place. And then number 2 is that there's no character that I'm actually rooting for. And I cannot just kind of like be happy with other people's anguish for being bad people. And I don't feel a catharsis in them succeeding in the show. So it has two of those things going against it. I will give it another episode. I will give it probably a couple more episodes, but I probably won't do... I don't see myself diving into this that much in the next week or two.
So let me round us out by saying, Max, you stole my idea for what I'd like this spinoff to be. I absolutely would love to see how Logan Roy built this organization, right? And what went into it. Why is there a series of theme parks, right, that they just have? That is an entire season in my mind.
It's just the theme park.
Yeah, it's just about the theme parks. That's all we get. It's a limited series. HBO, call me. As far as watching more of this show, I think that we've been talking about it a lot. This is not the best pilot that we have ever watched, by any means of the word. But there's something that's super captivating about it, right? Like, there is this sense of mystery and intrigue and this despicableness that is wildly just, it's like candy, right? You can't get enough of it. You want to take it in and you want to watch it. And then you want to be like, oh, look at how shitty they are in comparison to me. Like, this is a phenomenon that goes on with things like White Lotus, right? Where a lot of people are super shitty and you can't really root for anyone that has the money or that are the guests. But hey, we're still watching it. So am I going to give this another episode? I will give it 1 to 2 more episodes. But Max, you will get a very angrily worded text if I lose 2 hours of my life to this show, and I don't think it pays off.
You give it 3.
Maybe 3.
Fold some laundry. Just fold a little laundry while you're doing it. Doing one other task, then you're like not even wasting time.
Yeah, listen to a
podcast.
podcast.
Can I entice you into giving it like 37 more episodes?
Oh, maybe. We'll see. But with that all being said, y'all, our plane has come to a land. And before we sign off, I'd love to make sure that folks know where to find y'all. So, Anthony, first of all, thank you again so much for joining us to talk about Succession. Where can folks find you if they want to learn more about you?
My handle is Eggplanthony, which is a portmanteau combination word of eggplant and Anthony. And I don't know, I post some silly shit occasionally, but yeah, it's been a pleasure being here, guys.
Awesome. Max?
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on today, Anthony. Oh, man, well, you could find me in my living room every Sunday night just shaking ass to Nicholas Bertel's Succession theme song. You can find me on all things social media at Maxwell Singh.
Rich?
You can find me also not paying children at Damn That's Rich on Instagram.
And you can find me trying to build out a local team of dinger hitters for billionaire softball games. But you can find me on social media at RunJeffRun on Instagram and Twitter. You can find the TV Pilots License on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram at TV Pilots License. If you have a question about the show or for our next episode, you can email us at tvpilotslicense@gmail.com or give us a call at 213-290-1713. Next week, we are talking about Bones. So if you have any questions about Emily Deschanel or just the Deschanels, give us a call. With that being said, the plane has landed. The seatbelt signs are off. We look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you again soon. And until then, see you soon. Be great.